My stepmother threw me out of the house. Years later, I became the man who decided my family's fate. The day I lost my home. The day my stepmother threw me out of the house. It wasn't raining. People always imagine moments like that with dark clouds and thunder, as if the sky itself mourns your pain. But the sun was shining. Children were riding bicycles outside. A neighbor waved at me without realizing I was carrying everything I owned inside a single worn-out backpack. That was the day I stopped being someone's son. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. My name is Ethan Carter. When I was 10 years old, my mother died after a long battle with cancer. She wasn't rich. She wasn't famous. But she had a way of making every room feel safe. Before she passed away, she held my hand and whispered something I didn't fully understand back then. No matter what happens, never let anyone convince you that you're worth less than you are. At 10 years old, I thought those words were just something Mother said. Years later, they became the reason I survived. After Mom died, my father changed. He had once been the strongest man I knew. A construction contractor who laughed loudly, fixed everything around the house, and somehow made every weekend feel like an adventure. After the funeral, he barely smiled. Silence became his closest friend. For nearly 2 years, it was just the two of us. Frozen dinners, awkward conversations, two people trying to survive the same heartbreak without knowing how. Then, Linda arrived. She walked into our lives wearing expensive perfume and the warmest smile I'd ever seen. At least, that's what everyone else saw. She hugged my father, complimented the house, brought homemade cookies, called me sweetheart. She looked perfect. Almost too perfect. 3 months later, they got married. Everyone congratulated Dad. They said Linda had brought happiness back into his life. Only I noticed something strange. Whenever Dad left the room, her smile disappeared. Take your plate to the kitchen. That was the first order she ever gave me. Not asked. Ordered. I did it. I figured she was still adjusting. Then came the second order. The lawn isn't going to mow itself. Then, stop leaving your shoes there. Then, you eat too much. Then, you're becoming just like your lazy mother. That sentence changed everything. I stared at her. For the first time, not like a scared kid, like someone realizing the mask had fallen off. Dad never heard those comments. Or maybe, he didn't want to. Whenever I tried to tell him, Linda somehow started crying before I could finish. I've tried so hard to love Ethan, she'd sob. But he hates me. Dad would sigh. Ethan, please make an effort. Every single time. I became the problem. The years passed. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like a place where I was tolerated. Every mistake became proof that I didn't belong. If a glass broke, it was my fault. If money went missing, I was questioned first. If dinner burned, somehow I had distracted Linda. Even when I wasn't home. On my 16th birthday, nobody remembered. Not Dad. Not Linda. Not my stepbrother Ryan, who had been born 2 years after their marriage. I came home from school hoping maybe there would be a cake. Instead, Linda handed me a grocery list. Since you're doing nothing useful, buy these. I looked at the calendar hanging on the wall. March 14th. My birthday. I smiled anyway. Not because I was happy. Because I didn't want them to see me hurt. That night, I found something inside my old bedroom closet. A small metal box. My mother's handwriting covered the lid. For Ethan. My hands trembled. Inside, there was an old photograph, a silver watch, and a letter. I almost opened it, but Linda called my name downstairs. I slipped everything back into the box. I had no idea. That decision would change my entire life. 1 year later, Dad's construction business began losing money. Projects failed. Bills piled up. Arguments filled the house. Linda blamed everyone except herself. Mostly, she blamed me. If Ethan actually contributed instead of eating our food, Dad stayed silent. I worked after school, delivered pizzas, stacked shelves, saved every dollar I could, not because anyone asked me to, because I knew one day I'd need to leave. Then came the night everything exploded. It was almost midnight. I had just returned from work. The house was strangely quiet, too quiet. As soon as I walked into the living room, Linda pointed at me. There he is. 2 police officers turned around. One of them asked calmly, "Son, where were you tonight?" I froze. Working. Linda crossed her arms. My jewelry is gone. The officer looked at me. She says you're the only one with access to the bedroom. My heart nearly stopped. What? I didn't take anything. Linda looked directly into my eyes. I wanted to believe you had changed, but I guess I was wrong. Dad stood in the corner, avoiding my eyes, not defending me, not saying a single word. That silence hurt more than the accusation. The officers searched my room. 5 minutes later, one of them opened my backpack. Inside was Linda's missing jewelry. I couldn't breathe. I've never seen that before. The words sounded weak, even to me. Linda covered her mouth dramatically. I can't believe he'd steal from his own family. L'officier sighed. Son, do you have anything you'd like to tell us? I looked at Dad, waiting, begging. Just one sentence. My son wouldn't do this. Instead, he lowered his head. I don't know him anymore. Those 6 words destroyed something inside me that would never heal. Since it was Ethan's first accusation, and Linda insisted she didn't want to press charges, the officers gave him a warning instead of arresting him. They advised him to leave the house if the family situation had become unbearable. The moment the front door closed behind them, Linda smiled. Not the fake smile everyone loved. Her real one. Cold. Victorious. She walked upstairs, came back down carrying my backpack, then threw it onto the porch. You wanted freedom. You've got it. Dad still said nothing. Ryan watched from the stairs, confused, too young to understand what was happening. I picked up my bag, looked at my father one last time. I didn't steal anything. For a second, I thought I saw regret in his eyes. But regret without action changes nothing. He stayed where he was. I turned around, walked down the driveway, and left the only home I had ever known. I believed I had lost everything that night. I didn't know. The old metal box with my mother's letter was still hidden in my backpack, and inside that letter was a secret that would one day decide my family's fate. The letter that changed my life. The first night after I was thrown out of my own home, I slept on a wooden bench at a bus station. The lights stayed on all night. Cars came and went. People hurried past without looking at me. Some probably thought I was waiting for a bus. The truth was, I had nowhere to go. I had $37 in my wallet, a backpack filled with a few clothes, and a broken heart that felt heavier than everything else combined. I didn't cry, not because I was strong, because I had already cried so much over the years. There were no tears left. Around 3 a.m, I opened my backpack to look for a jacket. That's when I noticed something I didn't remember packing. The old metal box. For a moment, I just stared at it. It had survived everything. The police search, being thrown onto the porch, the long walk away from home. I slowly opened it. Inside were the same 3 things. My mother's silver watch, an old family photograph, and the unopened letter. My hands shook as I unfolded the yellowed paper. At the top, in her familiar handwriting, were the words, "To my son, open this only when life makes you believe you've lost everything." I smiled sadly. Well, Mom, I guess this is that day. The letter began simply, "My dear Ethan, if you're reading this, it means life has become harder than I ever wanted it to be. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer, but I need you to remember something. People can take your home. They can take your money. They can even take your good name. But they can never take your character unless you give it away." I stopped reading. A lump formed in my throat. It felt like she was sitting beside me, still protecting me, even after all those years. I continued. "There is something I never told you because you were too young. Before I met your father, I worked for a man named William Brooks. He wasn't just my employer. He became like family. If you ever reach a moment when you have no one left, find him, show him my silver watch. He'll understand." At the bottom of the letter was an address. No phone number. No explanation. Just an address in another city. I looked at my wallet. $37. The bus ticket cost almost all of it. It sounded crazy, traveling hundreds of miles because of an old letter written years ago. But what choice did I have? Go back? No. Home no longer existed. The next morning, I bought the ticket. The bus ride lasted almost 10 hours. Fields turned into cities. Cities turned into highways. Every mile carried me farther from the life I had lost. I stared out the window and made myself one promise. No matter what happens next, I'll never beg the people who abandoned me to take me back. The address led me to a quiet neighborhood lined with old trees. At the end of the street stood a large brick house. Elegant. Peaceful. Nothing like the mansion I had imagined. I checked the address 3 times before walking up the driveway. An elderly man opened the door before I even knocked. He looked to be in his 70s. Sharp blue eyes. Perfectly straight posture. The kind of face that had seen both success and heartbreak. "Can I help you?" I swallowed. "My name is Ethan Carter." For a second, nothing happened. Then I took the silver watch from my pocket. "I think you knew my mother." The moment he saw the watch, his expression changed completely. He whispered one word. "Emily." He stepped back, his eyes filled with tears. "Come inside." His name was William Brooks. For over 40 years, he had built one of the most respected engineering companies in the state. But that wasn't what surprised me. What surprised me was how warmly he spoke about my mother. "Your mother saved my life once." I blinked. "What?" William smiled. "I don't mean physically. When my wife died, I was ready to sell everything. I stopped caring. Your mother refused to let me give up. She reminded me that grief wasn't the end of life." He looked at the watch again. "I promised her that if she or her family ever needed me, I'd be there." I told him everything. My mother's death. Linda. The false accusation. Being thrown out. For nearly an hour. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he stood silently by the window. Finally, he turned toward me. "I believe you," for simple words. Yet they carried more love than I had received in years. I felt my eyes burn. William offered me a guest room, a warm meal, and something even more valuable. A chance. "I won't hand you success," he said. "If you stay here, you'll earn every opportunity." I nodded immediately. I wouldn't want it any other way. The next morning, I expected to wake up in comfort. Instead, William knocked on my door at exactly 6 o'clock. "Get dressed." 5 minutes later, I found myself holding a broom. He smiled. "Every person who works in my company starts at the bottom. You'll clean the warehouse." I wasn't disappointed. I was grateful. Because for the first time in years, someone wasn't judging me by lies. They were judging me by my work. Weeks turned into months. I swept floors, loaded trucks, organized inventory. I arrived before everyone else, left after everyone else. Some employees laughed at me. The old man found himself another charity case. I ignored them. William noticed everything, but he never defended me. Instead, he watched to see what I would do. One evening he asked, "Doesn't it bother you?" I smiled. People can call me anything. They just can't decide who I become. For the first time, William laughed. A real laugh. "Your mother used to say the exact same thing." Meanwhile, back in my old hometown, things weren't going well. Dad's business was falling apart faster than anyone expected. Suppliers demanded payment. Banks stopped answering his calls. Linda blamed everyone. But deep inside, she carried one fear she never admitted aloud. What if Ethan was innocent? Because if he was, then everything she had built on lies could one day collapse. And she had no idea that the boy she had thrown out with a backpack had just met the one man capable of changing his future forever. From nobody to someone they couldn't ignore. 3 years passed. Not with luck, not with miracles, with work. The kind of work that leaves your hands bleeding, your back aching, and your mind wondering if the struggle will ever be worth it. Every morning, I was the first person to arrive at Brooks Engineering. Every evening, I was the last one to leave. At first, I cleaned the warehouse. Then I learned how to organize inventory. Soon, I was helping the logistics team. Whenever someone called in sick, I volunteered. If a machine broke down, I stayed to help fix it. I didn't care what the job was. I cared about becoming someone no one could ever throw away again. William Brooks never praised me in front of others. He believed compliments were earned quietly. One Friday afternoon, nearly a year after I arrived, he called me into his office. "Sit down, Ethan." I sat. He slid a thick folder across the desk. "What do you see?" I opened it. Financial reports, shipping records, profit margins. I looked confused. "I'm not sure." William smiled. "Exactly. You don't know because you've never been taught." He leaned back in his chair. "So it's time you learned?" That day became the beginning of my real education. Every evening after work, William taught me business. Not from expensive textbooks, from experience. He explained how companies grow, why honest leaders earn loyal employees, how one bad decision can destroy years of trust. The biggest mistake people make, he often said, is believing money builds a business. Then he'd shake his head. People build businesses. Those words stayed with me. I studied harder than I ever had in school. Accounting, negotiation, leadership, finance, marketing. When I didn't understand something, I stayed awake until I did. Failure no longer scared me. Going back to the person I used to be, that scared me. One afternoon, William surprised me. We're visiting one of our construction sites. When we arrived, chaos was everywhere. Workers were arguing. A shipment hadn't arrived. The project manager blamed the supplier. The supplier blamed the weather. Everyone blamed someone else. William turned to me. "What would you do?" I froze. "I'm not qualified." He folded his arms. Neither were they when they started. I took a deep breath. Then I walked over to the workers. Instead of asking who was responsible, I asked one question. "What do we need right now to keep working?" The room fell silent. For the next 2 hours, everyone focused on solutions instead of excuses. By sunset, the project was back on schedule. As we drove home, William looked out the window. "You know why that worked?" I shrugged. "No, because leaders solve problems. They don't collect blame." Months later, William promoted me to operations assistant. Some employees congratulated me. Others whispered, "He's only moving up because the boss feels sorry for him." I heard every word. I never answered. Success speaks louder than arguments. One evening, while organizing old company files, I came across a familiar last name. Carter Construction. My father's company. I stared at the file. It contained contracts from years ago. William noticed my expression. "You know them." I nodded slowly. "My father owns it." William became unusually quiet. "I've done business with him before. He was a good man." The word was echoed in my mind. Was. Not is. That night I couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, I wondered how Dad was doing. Was he healthy? Was Ryan okay? Had Linda ever admitted the truth? Part of me wanted answers. Another part of me wanted to forget they ever existed. The next morning, William placed a newspaper on my desk. A small article caught my attention. Local construction company faces bankruptcy. Below the headline, a photograph. My father. He looked 10 years older. His shoulders were bent. The confident man I remembered had disappeared. I stared at the picture for a long time. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt sadness, because despite everything, he was still my father. That evening, William spoke carefully. "You still love him." I looked away. "I don't know. You don't have to like someone to love them." His words hit harder than he realized. Life moved on. By my 23rd birthday, I had become one of the youngest department managers in the company. The warehouse I once swept now reported directly to me. The same employees who laughed at me years earlier now asked for my advice, not because I demanded respect, because I had earned it. One rainy afternoon, William invited me to dinner. It wasn't at his house. It was at a quiet restaurant overlooking the river. After the meal, he folded his hands. "Ethan, I have no children." I remained silent. "I've spent 40 years building this company." He looked directly into my eyes. "And I've spent the last 6 watching you." My heart began to race. "I've tested your patience, your honesty, your loyalty, your character." He smiled gently. "You've passed every test." I frowned. "What are you saying?" William reached into his briefcase and placed a thick envelope on the table. Inside were legal documents. "I want you to become my partner." I couldn't speak. "This isn't charity. It's an investment. I trust you with everything I've built." For several seconds, the world around me disappeared. The frightened teenager sleeping on a bus station bench could never have imagined this moment. I finally found my voice. "Why me?" William looked out at the river before answering. "Because power doesn't reveal character. It reveals what was already there. You've been powerless. You've been betrayed. You've been humiliated. And despite all of it, you never became cruel." He smiled. "That's the kind of man this company needs. That night, as I drove home, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. A weak voice spoke on the other end. Ethan! My heart stopped. I hadn't heard that voice in 6 years. It was my father. He sounded exhausted, older, broken. There was a long silence before he whispered the words I never expected to hear. Son! I need your help. The phone call I never expected. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. 6 years. Not a birthday. Not a Christmas card. Not a single phone call. And now, my father was asking for my help. Neither of us spoke. The silence between us carried 6 years of pain. Finally, he whispered, I know I don't deserve to ask. But, please don't hang up. I closed my eyes. Every memory came rushing back. Linda's lies. The police officers. The jewelry inside my backpack. The front door closing behind me. The words that had haunted me every night since. I don't know him anymore. Those 6 words had destroyed a son. Now the same man was asking that son for help. What do you want? My voice was calm. Too calm. There was another long pause. Our company. It's finished. I said nothing. The bank is taking everything. We've sold the trucks. The equipment. The warehouse. I've tried everything. His voice cracked. I don't know what else to do. I looked across the city through my apartment window. Years ago, I would have given anything just to hear him say my name. Now, it didn't bring comfort, only questions. Then I asked the one question that had lived inside me for years. Do you believe I stole the jewelry? The line became silent. 10 seconds. 20. Almost a full minute. Finally, no. One word. Just one. But it came 6 years too late. I should have believed you. His voice trembled. I wanted to, but I was weak. I kept telling myself I'd fix everything tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. I'm sorry, Ethan. Those words should have healed me. Instead, they reminded me of everything we had lost. Because apologies cannot return birthdays, or childhoods, or trust. I have a meeting, I said quietly. I'll think about it. Before he could answer, I ended the call. The next morning, William noticed something was wrong. You didn't sleep. It wasn't a question. I nodded. My father called. William remained silent. I told him everything. When I finished, he walked to the window. You have 2 choices. What are they? You can make your decision based on your pain. He turned toward me. Or based on the man you've become. I don't know which one is right. William smiled sadly. The harder one usually is. 3 days later, a business magazine published a list of the fastest-growing engineering companies in the region. Brooks Engineering ranked number 3. My photograph stood beside William's. For the first time in my life, people saw me as a successful businessman. Not a victim. Not a burden. Not the unwanted stepson. Meanwhile, 200 miles away, Linda was staring at the exact same magazine. Her hands began to shake. She looked at the photograph again. No! It can't be! She picked up the magazine and rushed into the kitchen. David! My father looked up. What? She threw the magazine onto the table. His eyes widened. There I was, standing beside William Brooks, wearing an expensive suit, smiling confidently. For a long time, he couldn't say a word. Then he whispered, My son! Linda's face turned pale. How is this possible? Dad didn't answer. Because for the first time, he realized what he had truly lost. That evening, I received another call. This time, it wasn't my father. It was Ryan. He was 18 now. The little boy who had watched me leave the house was now a young man. Hi! His voice sounded nervous. I don't know if you remember me. I smiled despite myself. I remember. I'm sorry. The words came so quickly they almost sounded rehearsed. I was just a kid. I didn't understand what was happening. You don't have to apologize. No. I do. He took a deep breath. I found something. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Ryan lowered his voice. I was helping Mom clean the attic. I found an old storage box. There were photographs. And, he hesitated, a jewelry case. I froze. What? The same jewelry she said you stole. The room around me seemed to disappear. Ryan continued. It was hidden inside one of her old suitcases. I don't think she knows I found it. Every piece suddenly fell into place. She hadn't just accused me. She had planned everything. She had hidden the jewelry herself. All those years, she knew I was innocent. Ryan whispered, "I don't know what to do." I answered carefully, "Don't tell anyone." "What?" "Put everything back exactly where you found it." "Can you do that?" "Yes. I'll explain later." After ending the call, I sat alone in my office. Anger burned inside me. Not because I had finally learned the truth, because I realized something even worse. My father had destroyed our family, without ever demanding proof. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. William entered. "I've prepared the documents." "What documents?" He placed a folder on my desk. "We're expanding." I opened it. At the top of the first page, one name immediately caught my attention. Carter Construction Assets Acquisition. I looked up. William nodded slowly. "The bankruptcy court is selling your father's company. We can buy everything." My pulse quickened. The office, the equipment, the contracts, the family business, everything. William watched my expression carefully. "If we don't buy it, a competitor will." He paused. "But if we do," he leaned forward, "you'll become the man who decides your family's future." The room became completely silent. Years ago, they had thrown me out with a backpack. Now, fate had placed their entire future in my hands. I looked at the contract, then out the window. Finally, I signed my name. Not for revenge. Not yet. But because sometimes, life gives you one chance to decide whether pain will make you bitter or make you stronger. I had no idea. The hardest decision was still waiting for me. The man they never expected to see again. 1 week later, the deal was complete. Brooks Engineering had officially acquired the remaining assets of Carter Construction. The newspapers called it a smart business move. The financial analysts praised William Brooks for expanding his company at exactly the right time. No one knew the real reason I couldn't sleep that night. I wasn't thinking about profits. I was thinking about a driveway, a worn-out backpack, and a 16-year-old boy who had walked away believing no one would ever believe him. On Monday morning, William handed me a set of keys. "They're yours." I looked down. The keys to Carter Construction's headquarters. The building my father had spent 25 years creating. The same place where he used to take me on Saturdays when I was a little boy. I remembered sitting on his shoulders while he showed me blueprints and concrete mixers. Back then he used to say, "One day, all this will be yours if you work hard enough." Neither of us had imagined how that promise would come true. "Are you ready?" William asked. I took a slow breath. "No." He smiled. "Good. Anyone who feels completely ready for power usually shouldn't have it." When my car pulled into the company parking lot, everything looked smaller than I remembered. The faded company sign, the cracked pavement, the old brick office. Time hadn't been kind to the place. Employees gathered outside whispering. They knew the company had been sold. They just didn't know who the new managing partner was. As I stepped out of the car, the conversation stopped. Several workers stared at me. One older employee suddenly widened his eyes. "Ethan!" I recognized him immediately. Mr. Harris, the warehouse supervisor who used to sneak me hot chocolate during winter when I visited Dad after school. His eyes filled with disbelief. You really came back." I smiled politely. "I guess I did." Inside the conference room, nearly 40 employees sat in complete silence. Some looked nervous. Others looked exhausted. Many feared they were about to lose their jobs. I understood that fear. I had once been afraid of losing everything too. William introduced me briefly. Then he stepped aside. The room waited. I looked around slowly. "I know many of you expected layoffs." Several people lowered their heads. "I didn't come here to destroy what's left. I came to rebuild it." People exchanged surprised glances. "I don't care who made mistakes in the past. I care who is willing to build the future." For the first time that morning, someone smiled. After the meeting, Mr. Harris approached me. "I always knew you weren't a thief." Those words hit me harder than I expected. "You did." He nodded. "The day those police officers came, I saw Linda carrying something into the house before they arrived." I stared at him. "You never told anyone?" His shoulders dropped. "I tried. Your father refused to listen. He told me to stay out of family matters." Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. The truth had always been there. People had simply chosen not to see it. That afternoon, my assistant knocked on the office door. "Sir, someone's here to see you." "Who?" She hesitated. "Your father." The room suddenly felt smaller. I looked out the window for a long moment, then nodded. "Send him in." The door opened slowly. For a second, I barely recognized him. His hair had turned almost completely gray. The confident businessman was gone. The expensive suits had been replaced by a simple worn jacket. He looked tired, not just physically, spiritually. He stopped a few feet from my desk. "I wasn't sure you'd agree to see me." I remained standing. Neither of us moved. Neither of us knew how to begin. Finally, he spoke. "I heard you bought the company." "Yes." "I'm glad." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you?" He nodded. "If someone had to save it, I'm thankful it was you." There was no bitterness in his voice, only regret. He slowly reached into his coat pocket. "I brought something." He placed a small photograph on my desk. It was old, faded around the edges. A picture of him, my mother, and me sitting on his shoulders at the company picnic. I hadn't seen it in years. "I found it after you left." His voice cracked. "I kept it with me every day." I stared at the photograph without speaking. "Ethan, I failed you." No excuses. No blaming Linda. No denying the past. Just the truth. I should have protected you. I should have believed you. I chose peace over truth. And I lost my son because of it. For the first time in years, I saw genuine tears in his eyes. Not tears to manipulate. Not tears to escape responsibility. Real tears. I wanted to forgive him. Part of me desperately wanted my father back. Another part remembered sleeping on a bus station bench. Remembered birthdays forgotten. Remembered hearing, "I don't know him anymore." Some wounds don't disappear. They simply become part of who you are. Before I could answer, the office door burst open. Linda walked in. She hadn't changed much. Still perfectly dressed. Still carrying herself as though the world owed her something. The moment she saw me sitting behind the CEO's desk, her face went pale. "This isn't possible." I stood slowly. "No, it's very possible." She forced a laugh. "You think you've won because you bought a company?" I looked directly into her eyes. "I didn't come here to win. I came here for the truth." For the first time, I saw fear. Real fear. Because deep inside, she knew exactly what I was talking about. She quickly turned toward my father. "David, don't listen to him. He's trying to turn you against me." Dad didn't answer. He simply looked at her. A long, silent, disappointed look. Then he asked one question. "The jewelry?" Her confidence disappeared instantly. "What about it?" His voice remained calm. "Did Ethan steal it?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Silence can be louder than any confession. Just then, another voice came from the doorway. "I think it's time everyone heard the truth." We all turned. Ryan was standing there, holding an old wooden storage box in his hands. The same box he had found in the attic. The same box that contained the secret Linda had hidden for years. He walked into the room, placed it carefully on the conference table, then looked at his mother. His voice trembled. "But he deserves to know what you did." Linda's face lost all color. She took one step backward, then another, because after 6 years, the lie that had destroyed a family was finally about to die. The truth that destroyed every lie. No one spoke. The conference room was so quiet, you could hear the air conditioner humming. Ryan stood beside the table, one hand resting on the old wooden box. My father stared at it as if it were a bomb waiting to explode. Linda looked from Ryan to me, then back to the box. For the first time in her life, she had lost control. "Ryan." Linda forced a smile. "Sweetheart, put that away." Ryan didn't move. "You told me honesty is the most important thing." She swallowed. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Then today, let's be honest." Her smile disappeared. My father stepped closer. "What's inside the box?" Ryan looked at him. "I found it in the attic last week. I thought it was just old family stuff. But then..." He slowly opened the lid. Inside, wrapped in a faded white cloth, was a velvet jewelry case. The same one I had supposedly stolen 6 years earlier. The room fell silent. Dad's hands began to shake. He carefully opened the case. Every necklace, every bracelet, every ring. exactly as Linda had reported them missing. His face turned white. He looked at Linda. "Explain this." She laughed nervously. "There must be some mistake." "A mistake?" Dad's voice grew louder. "You told the police Ethan stole these." You cried. "You begged me to believe you. You let my son walk out that door." She took a step back. "I was scared." "Scared of what?" She couldn't answer, because there was no answer that could erase 6 years of lies. Ryan reached into the box again. There was something else. He pulled out a small envelope. It had only one word written across the front. "Insurance." My father frowned. "What is this?" Ryan handed it to him. Inside were photocopies of insurance claim forms. Claim forms Linda had filed only 3 days after accusing me. She had reported the jewelry as permanently stolen. The insurance company had paid her nearly $80,000. My father stared at the documents. His lips trembled. "No!" He whispered. "No!" Then he looked at Linda. "You planned this." Tears filled her eyes. But this time, no one believed them. She finally broke. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Her voice echoed through the room. "I just wanted money. I thought the insurance would solve everything. I was going to tell the truth later. But then," she looked at me. "He left. And after that, it became impossible. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had destroyed my life. For an insurance payout." My father collapsed into a chair. He buried his face in his hands. For several minutes, no one moved. Then, he began crying. Not quietly, not politely. He cried like a man realizing he had destroyed the one thing that truly mattered. "My son! I chose a lie. Over my own child." I stood there, watching him. 6 years earlier, I had dreamed about this moment. I imagined feeling victorious, satisfied. Instead, I felt empty, because justice doesn't erase pain. It only confirms it was real. Linda suddenly turned toward me. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. But please, don't send me to prison." I looked at her for a long moment, then calmly asked, "Did you ever apologize while I was sleeping on a bus station bench?" She lowered her head. "No." "Did you think about me when everyone believed I was a thief?" She whispered. "No." "Did you ever tell my father the truth?" Silence. That was all the answer I needed. A few minutes later, the company lawyer entered with 2 security officers. William Brooks had quietly arranged everything after Ryan called him the previous evening. The lawyer looked at Linda. "Mrs. Carter, based on the evidence provided today, there appears to have been insurance fraud, filing of a false police report, and intentional fabrication of evidence." Linda's knees nearly gave out. She looked desperately at my father. "David, please." He didn't even look at her. For the first time, he had stopped protecting her. The security officers escorted her from the room. As the elevator doors closed, she looked back at me one last time. Not with hatred, not with anger, but with the realization that every lie eventually demands its price. The room felt strangely peaceful after she left. Ryan walked over to me. "I'm sorry." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You were just a kid." He smiled through tears. "You still call me your brother?" I pulled him into a hug. "You never stopped being my brother." For the first time since I left home, I truly felt like I had family again. That evening, my father asked if we could talk alone. We sat in the old executive office, the same office where he used to let me scribble on blueprints as a child. He looked around slowly. "I built this place." Then he smiled sadly. "And somehow, it ended up belonging to the son I failed." I shook my head. "It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the future." He nodded. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted one chance to tell you something." He reached into his wallet, carefully unfolded a worn piece of paper. "I've carried this every day since you left." I recognized it immediately. It was the missing page from my mother's letter. The page I never knew existed. He handed it to me. At the bottom, in my mother's handwriting, were words that stopped my heart. "David, if you're reading this, promise me one thing. If Ethan ever loses his way, stand beside him, even when the whole world stands against him. One day, he will need his father more than anything else." A single tear rolled down my father's face. I broke the only promise your mother ever asked me to keep. I couldn't speak. Neither could he. The office remained silent, as two broken hearts tried to find a way back to each other. But neither of us knew. The greatest test of our family was still waiting just around the corner. The choice that defined my life. For the first time in 6 years, my father and I sat in the same room. Without anger. Without accusations. Just silence. Sometimes, silence says more than words ever can. He looked at me with tired eyes. I know I can't erase what I did. I nodded. No, I can't. He took a deep breath. But if I have whatever time is left, I'd like to spend it trying to become the father you deserved. Those words settled heavily between us. As a child, I had waited years to hear something like that. Now, I wasn't sure what to do with it. A week later, the news spread across the city. Linda had been formally charged with insurance fraud, filing a false report, and fabricating evidence. Her lawyer negotiated a plea agreement after she admitted what she had done. She received a prison sentence and was ordered to repay the insurance money. The newspapers loved the story. Stepmother's lie destroys family business. Insurance scam exposed after 6 years. People called me asking for interviews. Television reporters waited outside our office. I declined every request. I didn't want fame. I wanted peace. William smiled when I told him, "You've learned something many successful people never do." "What's that?" "You don't have to turn your pain into a performance." Over the next few months, Brooks Engineering continued to grow. The old Carter Construction employees slowly found hope again. We modernized equipment, won new contracts, paid overdue salaries. No one lost their job. The company wasn't just surviving anymore. It was thriving. One afternoon, Mr. Harris walked into my office. "You know why everyone's working so hard?" I smiled. "Because they need their jobs?" He laughed. "No. They're working this hard because they finally trust the person leading them." That compliment meant more than any award. Ryan also started working at the company during his college break. Unlike most owners' relatives, he insisted on starting in the warehouse, exactly where I had started years earlier. One employee joked, "You're the boss's brother." Ryan smiled. "That's exactly why I have to earn it." I couldn't have been prouder. My relationship with Dad improved slowly, not through speeches, through ordinary moments. Coffee on Saturday mornings, short conversations after work, fixing an old pickup truck together. Some wounds don't heal because someone says sorry. They heal because someone keeps showing up, day after day, month after month. Then one evening, William asked me to visit his house. He was sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked older, much older. He poured 2 cups of tea. "I've been thinking." "About what?" He smiled. "The future." I frowned. "You've built one." He shook his head. "No. You have." He handed me another envelope. Inside were revised ownership documents. I looked at the first page, then the second, then the third. My eyes widened. "William, this says..." He nodded. "I'm retiring, and I'm transferring my remaining shares to you." I stared at him in disbelief. "This company is your life's work." He smiled gently. "And now, it's yours to protect." I felt my throat tighten. "I don't know how to thank you." William chuckled. "You already have. When you chose kindness over revenge. When you gave people second chances. When you rebuilt instead of destroying." He looked toward the horizon. "That's how I know I made the right choice." A few days later, the board of directors gathered in the main conference room. After a unanimous vote, I was officially appointed Chief Executive Officer of Brooks Engineering Group. The applause echoed through the room. For a brief moment, I remembered the frightened 16-year-old boy sitting alone on a bus station bench. If only he could see this day, he would finally believe his mother's words had been true. Never let anyone convince you that you're worth less than you are. That night, I drove to the cemetery. It had been years since my last visit. The flowers in my hands shook slightly. I knelt beside my mother's grave. For several minutes, I couldn't speak. Finally, I smiled. "You were right, Mom. They took my home. They took my name. They even took my future. Or at least, they thought they did." A gentle breeze moved through the trees. I met someone who believed in me. I found my way. And I found Dad again. I placed the flowers carefully beside her headstone. "I think You be proud. As I stood to leave, I noticed another bouquet of fresh flowers already resting there. Confused, I looked around. There was no one. Just a small folded note tucked beneath the bouquet. It read, Emily, I finally kept my promise. I brought our son home. David. I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, the weight I'd been carrying began to lift. Not because the past had disappeared, but because it no longer controlled my future. And yet, life still had one final surprise waiting for all of us. Home was never a place. 3 months later, life had become strangely peaceful. The company was growing faster than anyone had predicted. New projects arrived every week. Employees who once feared losing their jobs were now mentoring new recruits. For the first time in decades, Brooks Engineering wasn't just one of the most successful companies in the state. It had become one of the most respected, not because we were the biggest, but because people knew one thing. If we gave our word, we kept it. One Monday morning, I stood in front of nearly 500 employees. Behind me hung a new sign, Integrity before profit. It wasn't a marketing slogan. It was the foundation of everything we built. I looked across the room. I know many of you came here because you needed a paycheck. A few people smiled. But I hope you stay because you find something even more valuable. A young engineer raised his hand. What? I smiled. A place where people matter more than mistakes. The room filled with applause. That afternoon, my assistant walked into my office. Sir, there's someone outside asking for you. Who is it? She won't give her name. I walked into the reception area. A woman stood quietly near the window. She looked older, much older. The confidence that once defined her had disappeared. It was Linda. She had been released early for good behavior after serving her sentence and paying restitution. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. She finally broke the silence. I almost turned around 3 times before coming in. I remained calm. What do you want? She looked down at her hands. Nothing. I needed to tell you something without lawyers, without police, without anyone else listening. She took a shaky breath. I spent years blaming everyone for my own choices. I blamed your father. I blamed money. I even blamed you. Tears rolled down her face. But the truth is, I ruined my own life. She reached into her purse and placed a small envelope on the reception desk. I've sold everything I still owned. The money isn't much, but it's the first honest money I've earned in years. I looked at the envelope. I don't want it. I know. She nodded. It isn't for you. She smiled sadly. It's for the employee scholarship fund you started. I looked at her, surprised. She had somehow learned about the program we had created to help employees' children attend college. It's anonymous, she said. No one has to know. For the first time, I saw genuine humility. Not fear. Not manipulation. Just regret. As she turned to leave, I stopped her. Linda. She looked back. I forgive you. The words surprised even me. I'll never forget what happened. But I refuse to carry hatred for the rest of my life. She covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Thank you. Then she quietly walked away. And that was the last time I ever saw her. Months passed. Dad's health slowly began to improve. One Saturday, he invited Ryan and me to the old family house. The house where everything had begun. As I stood in the driveway, the memories came flooding back. The porch where I tied my first pair of work boots. The oak tree my mother had planted. The window of the room I'd once called mine. It no longer felt like a place of pain. It felt like proof of how far I'd come. Dad unlocked the front door. I've been cleaning. The house looked almost empty. Most of the expensive furniture Linda had bought was gone. Only the things that truly mattered remained. Old family photographs. Mom's piano. The dining table where we used to eat together before life fell apart. Dad walked into the living room. I've made a decision. Ryan and I looked at him. I'm selling this house. I was surprised. You love this place. He smiled gently. I love the memories. He looked around one last time. But a house is only wood and bricks. He turned toward us. Home. Is the people willing to stay? A month later, the house was sold. Part of the money went to charity. Part was invested in the scholarship foundation. The rest, Dad quietly divided between Ryan and me. I tried to refuse. He shook his head. This isn't an inheritance. It's an apology. I accepted, not because I needed the money, but because I understood what it meant. 1 year later, Brooks Engineering celebrated its 50th anniversary. Hundreds of employees and their families gathered for the event. William Brooks, now retired, was the guest of honor. Although his hair had turned completely white, his smile hadn't changed. When I invited him to the stage, the audience stood and applauded for nearly 2 minutes. He leaned toward the microphone. I've spent 50 years building buildings. He looked at me, but the greatest thing I ever built was trusting the right person. The applause grew even louder. Then, he surprised everyone. He asked me to stand beside him. I'd like to introduce someone. He smiled proudly. This isn't the boy who lost his home. This is the man who taught all of us what leadership really means. I felt my throat tighten. Looking out across the crowd, I noticed Dad standing in the front row. He wasn't clapping the loudest. He was simply crying. Not from sadness, from pride. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I walked alone through the quiet company courtyard. The sun was setting. Golden light reflected off the glass windows. I took my mother's silver watch from my pocket, the same watch that had started everything. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "You were right. No one decides my worth. Except me." I smiled, not because life had been fair. It hadn't. Not because justice had erased the past. It couldn't. I smiled because I finally understood something my mother had tried to teach me all those years ago. Your greatest revenge is not destroying the people who hurt you. Your greatest revenge is building a life so meaningful that their betrayal no longer defines your future. And in that moment, standing where thousands of dreams had been built, I realized something I had searched for since the day I left home with a backpack. I had finally found my way home. The end.